Welcome to the Line Movement MMA Betting Show. I'm Daniel Levi from Best Fight Picks and Half the Battle, joined now by Dan Tom of MMA Junkie and the Protect Your Neck podcast. We're going to be talking about the heavyweight championship going down this Saturday night in Las Vegas, Nevada, because the champion, Stipe Miocic, is putting his belt on the line in the trilogy against Daniel DC Cormier. Before we get to all that, all our Canadian listeners, make sure you'll go to blitzbet.eu. For all our Americans and everybody else worldwide, stick around because news coming soon. But Dan, Tom, let's get right down to business because this main event, this isn't the first time they fought. This isn't the second time they fought. This is about to be the trilogy. It's going to be settled once and for all. How you doing today?
Pretty good, man. This trilogy fight, I was really excited. Then I was not so excited. And then after I dived in, I'm still excited. I don't know if I'm certain, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But my excitement level for this card, for this fight, is surprisingly high, I'd say. What about for you, Dan?
Listen, if you're telling me there's fist fights on a Saturday night inside a steel cage, excitement's always high. And then you tell me it's the trilogy for the heavyweight title. You mean we're gonna find out who the baddest man on planet Earth is? Yeah, I'm ready to go, man. Then that co-main event between Marlon Chito Vera and Sean O'Malley. Let's do this thing. So look. Main event of the evening. This is the trilogy, and there's a lot of narratives going on. I'm sure we're going to talk about most of that stuff, but I feel like there's a lot of different ways this fight could go.
Yeah, this is a fight where, first of all, to pretend to have a certain beat, I think would kind of discredit heavyweight MMA, right? It's heavyweight MMA for a reason. We talk about volatile lines, volatile style matchups. Heavyweight seems to kind of bring an influx of those things, but dude, you are striking on a lot of the notes right away. You're not wasting any time, my friend, and you're hitting on the really important notes. We may end up being on the same side or have the same questions, but maybe we might slightly differ on the details. So I'm glad you brought that up as far as, was it just a simple adjustment? And I don't know if people are discrediting Stipe, and I also don't know how much credit to give Stipe outside of the adjustment. And that's not taking anything away from him. However, I will say to something you were saying that Daniel Cormier, even though someone's winning rounds, there is something called a unspoken fight momentum, especially if you've been in there, not even at the top level like these outliers. I'm just talking about being tired and knowing what it's like to work tired. You might win the battle, right, Dan? But you might not win the war.
Look, a lot of people are saying that this time Daniel Cormier is going to go out there, get back to his roots, show off that USA wrestling. And it's like, let's examine that statement real quick, because firstly, let's not even forget about the fact that Stipe Miocic is a former D1 wrestler too. So to go out there and lay on a guy like Stipe for 3 of 5 rounds, in order to win this fight, that seems like a far fetch to me. But let's revisit the second time they fought, because Daniel Cormier did go to his wrestling in that fight, and it was Stipe that made Daniel Cormier work for every single takedown attempt he went for. Now, in the first round, Daniel Cormier was able to pick him up, get a little bit of the old Matt Hughes, walk him across to the center of the octagon, put him down on his back. However, what happened after that? What happened after that, Dan Tom, is that you already know when a wrestler's got you down, one way to get up, you push on the back of their head, you scoot those hips out, and you get back up. And basically, the round ends with Stipe going for a takedown attempt of his own. That, to me, implies that, he wasn't about to get laid on the entire round. Basically, he got back up, and then all the other subsequent takedown attempts were stuffed. So why am I supposed to believe that now Cormier is just going to rinse and repeat, takedown after takedown, when the last time I saw them fight, yeah, he was successful in the first round with takedowns, but he never got another takedown again that entire fight. And he did try, for the record.
That's the problem for me, is that I initially picked Cormier to win both times, Dan, even the first time when he upset Miocic. But I didn't obviously pick him by a first-round knockout. I actually picked him by decision because I believe that the light heavyweight, especially who was better skilled grappler on paper, which I still believe Cormier is the better grappler overall on paper, would be able to outdo the bigger man in the stretch. We talked about winning the battle as opposed to winning the war. Dan, you grapple. I'm sure you've been with some smaller guys where you're like, I'm going to have the size advantage on this guy. And maybe you do. Maybe you get the top position, you get the dominant position, but he's making you work. Kind of in a reverse to your point that you just made, Dan. He's making you work. And little do you know, by the second or third round, all of a sudden you're tired. He's riding your back. Now he's the one on top muscling you around. So the point is, just because someone's bigger doesn't mean they're always the better grappler. Now, although that principle is true, Dan, I don't think I was right when I had to go back and re-examine because, again, that fight at UFC 241, the rematch, forced me and I'm sure others to really re-examine Cormier's 5-round history, something you kind of portended to and did a good job at. When you go back and look at it, I mean, even prime Daniel Cormier, semi-relevant to this fight as far as heavyweight division prime Daniel Cormier. Go back to the Josh Barnett fight, right? It's the first fight where he loses a round, but even though he only loses one of those rounds, yes, one of those rounds is in 4 and 5, and it is rounds 4 and 5. And again, I'm not a big stats guy. I'm not living and dying on this hill, but you do see a dramatic drop-off as far as Cormier's output in those rounds. Dan, you already mentioned the Jones fight. We saw where Cormier was able to stay competitive with Jones for the first 3, but by the end of the 3rd and 4th and 5th, it was kind of clear who was going to walk out the winner that night. So that worries me. I had to reassess that, and when I reassessed that, I think perhaps Stipe could be the deceptively better built man for 5 rounds. I do think that is worrisome. I don't want anybody to discredit what he did in that first round, Dan, because he got him down, he kept him down. Now, Stipe Miocic, even when rocked by Alistair Overeem, a dangerous vet, like it was half conscious and Stipe was hard to hold down. Like this guy is almost impossible to hold down. So what Cormier did in the first round, Dan, was impressive. It should not be overlooked. It brought some questions that I had about Stipe's get-up game as far as turtling. It's going to open up back takes, front headlocks, and cradle opportunities. We saw glimpses of that at the end of the first round. The problem is, as I kind of perhaps give away my pick here, is that Daniel Cormier, yes, the smaller cage is going to help him over a footwork-based heavyweight like Miocic. However, if that encourages him to wrestle and he keeps wrestling, could he tire himself out? Because even the best wrestlers, the most prime wrestlers, let's look at AKA, Dan, let's look at Khabib Nurmagomedov, a lightweight, supposed to have way better cardio, dominant wrestling, the record stands. Even him, by the 3rd round, if the guy is still around, even if it's a striker like Barbosa or McGregor, who's defending takedowns and even winning some of those rounds? You know what I'm saying? The point is, as Chael Sonnen brings up, even the best in the world can maybe wrestle for 3 out of 5 rounds. You got to find stalls and breaks, and I'm not sure he's going to get those here, Dan.
If this hits deep waters, I gotta favor Stipe Miocic. Right now, they got it to pick him. I'm gonna go ahead and give you my pick, and still the heavyweight champion of the world, Stipe Miocic. I love Daniel Cormier, one of my favorite fighters. But I mean, are we going to even touch on the fact that he's mentioned retirement? He's 41 years old, has 1 foot out the door. Are we even going to mention that? Because the reason I'm bringing it up is when you get to those deep waters, when you have to bite down on that mouthpiece, when you have to dig deep. I mean, if in the back of his mind, it's like, hey, this is my last fight. Like I'm already a former 2-division champ. I'm already, Daniel fucking Cormier. I don't got to do nothing else. Like I'm good to go. Whereas I think that Stipe is still willing to die in that cage. So for that reason, as long as there's no early knockout, I got Stipe winning this fight.
Dan, I got to sign off on you there as we close off on this one. 2020 is making me do weird things, Dan. I'm picking against fighters that I've never picked against. I'm betting on fighters that I've never bet on. Right or wrong, it's been crazy. Picked against Max Holloway for the first time. Now, this isn't the first time I picked against DC, Dan. There's a guy named John Jones out there. However, I don't think I picked against DC otherwise. He is one of my longtime favorites. I've got a soft spot from the Strikeforce days. But let me close with this, Dan, to encapsulate this matchup for analogies. You tell me what you think, because we're a fan of a similar ilk here. Another one of my favorites who started off as Greco, wrestled at a world-class level, a high level, boxed a bit, and he mixed those skills. A guy named Randy Couture, and he invaded, if we're going to compare trilogies here, he invaded another man's division named Chuck Liddell, who also came from a wrestling base. But Dan, like Stipe Miocic, Chuck Liddell was one of the few guys at a heavier weight class in his era who could fight going backwards and use his wrestling to stand. The first fight, of course, Randy Couture, Dan, you know this, but for our audience, of course, there's a lot of younger audience out there. I get surprised. Randy mixed his clinch wrestling, his boxing, and just his wrestling in general to score the upset. If that sounds familiar in the first fight. In the second fight, though, the slightly younger man, we're talking 4 to 7 age differentials in these trilogy comparisons, Dan. The slightly younger man was able to get a beat in his timing and was able to find his counter shots to put him out both times after. I think this trilogy mirrors that one.
Look, I'm not even going to bring up the 8-inch reach advantage or the 5-inch height advantage, because when it comes to a guy like Daniel Cormier, size isn't really a factor for me. That guy, Daniel Cormier, is as tough as they come. He's done what he's done, former 2-division champ. But just based on the footage I've seen of him in those deep waters, Stipe doesn't seem like a guy that's going to gas out or break to me. So the co-main event of the evening in the bantamweight division, we got a showdown between Sugar Sean O'Malley and Marlon Chito Vera. The question is Marlon able to take this one into deep waters? Because I'm very curious. I got a lot of questions about Sean O'Malley. I know how amazing his distance is, his size for the weight class. You don't often see 6-foot tall bantamweights. His timing, his precision, his accuracy. Obviously, offensively striking, amazing. I don't got anything bad to say about his offensive striking. And not that I have anything bad to say about any other areas. I just don't know what the other areas are like. Like, what does he look like off his back? What does he look like when he's not the one in control? What happens if he gets his back taken? I mean, is he, is it, going to be shortly? Is it going to be over shortly after? Is he going to survive? Is he a tough guy too? How's his wrestling? There's a lot of shit I don't know. And like, look, against Eddie Wineland, who, shout out to the former WEC champion, a guy that you and I both respect. Like, and I saw Johnny Eduardo starch Eddie in the first round. Like, I've seen Teco Quinones get knocked out by Davi Hamosh in the first round. So I've seen all these guys get handled easily. Terrion Ware never won a UFC fight. Andre Sukumta has got the IQ of you-know-what. So I feel like it's a situation where this is the first real fight Sean O'Malley's ever had. Is he ready to pass this test, though?
For all those reasons, it's a really great test. I think I think the UFC deserves credit there, and I think that regardless of your thoughts of O'Malley, my colleague Nolan King, who's actually picking Chito Vera to upset, said regardless of how this fight goes, I don't think O'Malley's a hype job. But like you said, Dan, we just have there's so much we don't know. So even though I like this matchup, I like this test, I'm excited to break it down with you, Dan. I disagree with this line. Now, in the defense of the line, it didn't open as wide as you stated. The public pushed it that way. But even if you look at the opener, in my opinion, you can disagree. Feel free to hit us up in the comments below. But I felt this should have been closer to maybe not pick'em odds, but a much closer to pick'em odds than perhaps where they were opening in the 2-1 range. Am I crazy there, Dan?
I know officially it says he's coming off an L, but I think we all know that only one man got broken that night, and it was not Marlon Chito Vera. So as far as I'm concerned, he's on a 6-fight win streak. As far as the UFC is concerned, he's on a 6-fight win streak, because between Song Yadong and Chito Vera gets the pay-per-view co-main event. It's not Song Yadong, it's Chito Vera. So as far as we're all concerned, he's on a 6-fight win streak. He's looking better than he's ever looked. Another thing I want to say, because how I mentioned Eddie Wineland's been knocked out before. You know how I mentioned Teco Quinones has been knocked out before. Well, Chito Vera is a guy that went to Brazil and fought John Lineker, and 2 of the judges in Brazil scored the 3rd round for him. So what that means, Dan Tom, is that he ate all of John Lineker's hardest shots. John Lineker, a guy who's universally considered to be one of the hardest hitters in bantamweight history, eats all his shots, goes out there, wins the 3rd round. Against Song Yadong, who everyone was talking like he was the second coming of Christ. Like, this is the new knockout artist at 135 pounds. Well, what happens when he throws his hardest shot at Chito Vera? Chito eats it, no problem, keeps going forward, arguably edges the 2nd, and then almost finishes in the 3rd. So Chito's got one of the best chins in the bantamweight division. And also, on a side note, when it's all said and done, he will go down as the man with the most finishes in bantamweight history. Look it up. But Conor McGregor, so I didn't really feel like he lost his mind until the Diaz fight. And that's, after he already touched gold. He starched Jose Aldo with that, was it 7-second or 13-second knockout? The first punch he threw knocked him out, right? So I felt like leading up to the Aldo fight and all those fights that Conor was still, you hear him talk and you're inspired by what he has to say. Like the guy, very like he's insightful, he's intriguing. He's
He's still
like
martial
Conor
arts
was the
Connor.
man when what's up?
He was still martial arts Connor.
Exactly on his come up. He was still, reading The Secret every day, right? But when it came time to the Diaz fight, that's when he lost his mind. That's when he starts, making fun of him for teaching kids jujitsu, which is like, why are you going to make fun of someone for some shit like that? Whereas before, you'd make fun of someone for their chin, or he takes a knee every fight. Like, okay, that's all fair. They're going to fight anyways. Talk all the shit you want. Conor didn't lose his mind until the first Diaz fight. Whereas O'Malley hasn't even touched a top 15 ranking. O'Malley hasn't fought for a belt. O'Malley hasn't done shit. And I might be way off, but like I feel like he's kind of not backpedaling, not reeling, but I don't like how he's acting. I'll be 100% with you. And I'm not, the kind of guy to get sensitive or offended by any shit whatsoever. But I'm going to be 100 with you, man, because I love trash talk. I love it when opponents dig deep. I love all that stuff because at the end of the day, Dan, they're going to fight inside a steel cage on a Saturday night. So all the differences can be settled then. But I kind of don't like that he dyed his hair the color of the Ecuadorian flag. Like, I don't know why. Like, maybe I'm being too sensitive, but something about that really rubs me the wrong way. And I know if you listen to Marlone's interviews, he'll say that doesn't bother him. Of course he'll say it's no big deal, but like, Marlon, I know deep down you're not okay with that. I know the people around you, all your Ecuadorian family. I mean, look, I made a post today on Twitter, and Marlon's wife responded to it saying it was offensive. Okay, so if his wife is responding to my tweets, I know all the people around him are saying something like, hey, make this guy fucking pay for dyeing his hair the color of the Ecuadorian flag. And even though Cheeto will never admit that, I know deep down that doesn't sit well with him. And I'll be honest with you, Dan Tom, it doesn't sit well with me. And I don't know why. I feel like there's certain places you don't go. I feel like, hey, it's totally fine. If the guy's fat, make fun of him for being fat. If the guy has no chin, make fun of him for having no chin. If the guy is stupid, make fun of him for being stupid. But certain places you don't go in my book is family and where you're from. I kind of feel like Sean O'Malley crossed the line, even though that might not have anything to do with this fight, even though it's not that big of a deal. They're going to settle it inside a cage. I personally don't like that, Dan Tom.
You know what? I think that from a comeuppance point of view, I think that even if Sean O'Malley didn't do it, I think people would still feel good seeing this guy get, KTFO'd, so to speak, because Sean O'Malley kind of has that about him. And it's kind of ironic because I, on the other hand, am usually like the guy that's more sensitive and not that saying you are or it's wrong to be. I definitely have no qualms with those lines that you drew. Those are very respectable lines, by the way. But usually, I guess I'm trying to out myself more here. And I was thinking about that too. But to be honest, I think the person that's going to hurt most is O'Malley, and not in the meme sense that I explained is already going to happen to him whenever this kid does lose. But I'll just consider that. I'll consider the emotional part a wash, but I think that it detriments O'Malley more because I think he could be waking up a beast in Vera here because it's the slow starts and the takedowns that I looked at for this matchup. And it's not just as simple as O'Malley gets first round finishes, and if it goes to the decision, Vera can break him down, which, by the way, I think Vera can break him down here through via leg kicks, which are very underrated. They're not talked about. They've only gotten harder and better. And, of course, Chito Vera's body work. We saw it way back when he fought Wulu Giberen, and we've seen it even in the Noelle Hernandez. That's not how the fight was finished, but if you look at that fight, it was a body shot. Chito Vera has really good body shots, and like you said, Dan, we don't see long bantamweights like O'Malley. O'Malley has a good sense of range. He can slip and evade back, but what's long and what's kind of there? It's his torso. So body shots even break the best of guys down. So if O'Malley has the chin that he seems to have, he could still get hurt by body shots broken down for an opportunistic submission, perhaps in the third round. That round later in the fight, although you're getting plus money on an under, although I think this fight's going to go later. But that's where the value is. Of course, the value is on the dog side here. I came into this fight wanting to pick and wanting to play Vera. I'm a big Chito Vera fan, regardless of his comments toward Yadong. I don't care. I'm a big Chito Vera fan, okay? But even though I'm not confident in this pick, I didn't see enough wrestling, despite Chito Vera is working with Daryl Christensen, who specializes in the clinch. He works in that San Diego scene. It's a good pairing. So is Jason Perillo. Dan, you know I stand for some Jason Perillo, and it's exactly what he needs to complement, the game under Colin Oyama, who I also love. Like, these are all great things. Chito Vera always keeps himself in great shape. He looks like he's coming in a good shape. I don't feel like you have to worry about that here if you're a Vera supporter. But ultimately, Dan, he gets hit too much. He doesn't wake up about it. He doesn't corner guys enough. He doesn't do active shot takedowns or reactive shot takedowns enough. And even when he does get his clinch takedowns, it's only till way late in the fight or midway in the fight, and it's only after fighters are engaging with him. They have to almost engage with him and remind him, like, oh, yeah, I can grapple too. Oh, and then he'll hit his outside trip. But unless it's that one outside trip, I haven't really seen Chito Vera get any other kind of takedown outside of, catch, kick, scrambles, or collisions. I'm talking about measured wrestling style takedowns. I still haven't seen enough to sell me. And even though you can look at matchups like Andre Uhl for comparison with the reach, no offense to Andre Uhl, I think he's overrated. Everyone wants to talk about bad decisions. Go watch the Jonathan Martinez fight. And even forget the Martinez fight. Look at Uhl's fight with Chito Vera. Even if you look at it, like, Uhl doesn't throw, Uhl gasses. Uhl's been destined for 45 3 fights ago. He should have been at 45, because if you look at him, his gas tank drops each time. And I was suspected of that of Sean O'Malley, because you see his gas tank drop in round 2 from Terrion Ware, who is much better than his record leads on, and was a good test for O'Malley, because it forced O'Malley to dig in a spot he could have quit in. Dan, me and you both have that amateur fight of Sean O'Malley where he quit, burned into our heads. Perhaps that's why I picked Sukumta to beat him. And hey, maybe anybody would have beaten O'Malley that night if they actually had the IQ to take advantage of the broken foot. The point is, we don't know how much O'Malley has grown, but the little things he has shown, like wrist controls and the way to get up, and the camp that he comes from as far as, good school get-ups, I don't think he's dead in the water as soon as he hits the ground. I don't think Vera outvolumes him, even if he does have moments. I think Vera has to both hurt him and get his opportunistic submission. I'm hoping it happens for Vera. I'm hoping it happens for Vera bettors. I just couldn't officially pick him. Does that sound too crazy there? Long-winded, I know.
There's nothing crazy. I mean, he's minus 310, so it's like they agree with you too. I mean, you're probably right. So I obviously don't want to talk about Chito's comments more than what I'm about to say, and I'm not defending those comments, because you'll never hear those kind of words come out of my mouth, Dan Tom. The only thing I will say, not to give him a pass, but just to kind of have more understanding, is that, this is a guy that's lived in the United States for less than half a decade, totally, so yeah. English is his second language. He didn't know what he was saying. And look, if he was American and he said that shit, then we'd probably still be talking about it, for years to come. We'd be like, do you remember that time? Right. But like, I feel like, heat of the moment, he didn't really mean it the way it came out. And afterwards he was like, oh shit, I didn't realize that's like the way people took it. And
right.
That's not how I meant it. He came out and said that afterwards. So I don't really hold it against him. I feel like it was a learning lesson. You're new to the United States. Like, you can't talk like that, Chito. I feel like you learned his lesson. But as far as the matchup is concerned, and obviously you brought up a million amazing points like that. Vera's very hittable early on. And if he's not turned on early in the early going, he's going to get lit up. There's no questions asked. And maybe knocked out. I mean, if he gets knocked out here, then holy shit, Sean's the real deal. And again, if Sean wins a hard-fought fight, then he's the real deal. So here's the thing I want to say, though, because I was kind of bringing this up earlier. What happens if Chito Vera takes Sean O'Malley to that place that Derek Brunson took Edmund Shabazian to, where that first round, Edmund's looking like a future world champion. And, Brunson, I know he's been hittable in the past. I know he's been knocked out in the past, but he was able to weather that storm. And then he took him to a dark place that he's never been to in his life. I'm just curious to see what happens if Chito takes Sean there, because Chito took John Lineker there. Chito took Song Yadong there. And these guys, Lineker's a guy that's in the top 10. So he's already been in there with TJ Dillashaw, gone 3 rounds with him with a broken jaw. Like, he knows what adversity means. I'm not convinced Sean O'Malley does. Now, you bring up so many great points. The people he's training with. I mean, he's got Tanquinho Mendez, one of the best jiu-jitsu guys on planet Earth, rolling with him every day. So I do expect improvements, no doubt about it. It's just we haven't seen it in a fight yet. And the 2 times, similar to Edmund, the 2 times that Sean O'Malley went past the first round, let's be honest, shit got sketchy. That second round versus Terrion Ware, I mean, no disrespect to Terrion, he went 0-3 or 0-4 in the UFC, and then he lost his subsequent regional fights by decision as well. Terrion Ware was teeing off on him in that second round. You got to give O'Malley credit because after his USADA suspension, which that's a different topic, but I will say this. He comes back from his USADA suspension. All of a sudden, he's jacked. All of a sudden, he's big. Now he's fucking huge. I'm like, God damn. Because like before, it was like, oh, the little skinny guy that can strike. Now it's like the big skinny guy that can strike. So like he's put on a lot of size, whatever he's doing. And like, is it a case where like his body naturally produces ostarine? So he's got like a built-in advantage? Like, just correct me if I'm totally full of shit, because I'm no doctor. So I could be way wrong. But like, wasn't he like testing positive for like ostarine like every couple months, and they kept him out for a couple years because of that, and now all of a sudden he's the biggest he's ever looked? So I mean, maybe he's got the best strength and conditioning program on planet Earth, or maybe he's got some really some really good Flintstone vitamins. I don't know what the deal is, but what I will say is that we still don't know what happens with Sean O'Malley in deep waters. Is this the fight where we're going to find out? I don't know. It could be, or it might not be, because there's things going against Vera, like his early hit ability, which you touched on, and it's evidence in a lot of his fights. But there's also a lot of fights where he gets hit early and then he takes over late. What happens if he takes over late here? So since I have all these questions and it's like a plus 250 underdog, I will take Chito Vera, and I'll say that first round, he's going to get lit up. It is what it is. The first round, he's going to get lit up. However, if he is conscious by the time the second round rolls around, I feel like that's when he can start, slowly chipping away, mixing in the body shots like you mentioned, throwing those hard kicks, which Chito has, then hopefully getting him up against the fence, mixing that trip, and then slow him down. By the third round, go out there and TKO him. So it's not the most confident pick in the world, but like when I don't have, it's like this ultimate like confidence that the minus 310 favorite's going to win, I got to roll with the underdog. So we'll see what happens. This is the test right here. Like when Conor fought Dustin Poirier, a lot of those same questions were at play, but I took Conor there because I could see the way Dustin was acting. Dustin was acting uncharacteristic going into that fight. Dustin was overly emotional. Dustin was cutting too much weight. I can't really say the same things about Chito Vera, man. Like I don't feel like he's overly emotional. I feel like he's got every reason to act uncharacteristic. I mean, the guy's dyeing his hair the color of the Ecuadorian flag. The guy's saying he's going to knock you out in the first round. Oh, you're going to knock me out in the first round? He's got every reason to be emotional, but he isn't. So I view this as a different situation. We'll see what happens. I'll roll with the dog here.
Dan, if anyone on this card's taking Flintstone vitamins, it's only because they stole them from JDS. Let's be honest. We'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that in a second.
Very soon.
But lastly, to cap this one off, yeah, I'm going to go with O'Malley. I don't think he finishes Chito Vera. Hopefully that means he gets that impressive performance, I guess, for his sake that you kind of talked about. And he would earn that respect going 3 rounds and beating a guy like Chito Vera. It's going to be my pick, but in no way do I think anybody should lay down the minus 3-1. The value is completely on Vera, and I really want to pick Vera here. I'm going to feel like a dummy because, Dan, I hate being on these spots. You know me. I love being the guy who fades the prospect and backs the veteran. You know my contrarian ass. So when I'm like on the side like I was with the Shabazian fight for the Brunson, I always feel extra dumb for getting those wrong. You're always going to get picks wrong in this game. It's part of the game. But I will admit, man, those ones kind of bother me more. So props to all y'all who are picking. And if you end up being right on Vera, but I guess my official pick's going to be O'Malley by decision.
Everybody watching at home, let us know who you got in the comments below. Make sure you follow us at line_movement. Go to linemovement.com and let us know what y'all think. Dan Tom, talk about this heavyweight featured bout. JDS, in my opinion, is one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. When you look at his initial run from his UFC debut, the knockout win over Fabricio Werdum, and you take it all the way to his first title defense against Frank Mir, I mean, people talk about Fedor, people talk about Kane, people talk about Stipe. That run JDS had, to me, is arguably the greatest heavyweight of all time. Like, that was just such a phenomenal run. And I mean, let me count out exactly what the record was real quick.
It was good. It was one of my
He went
favorite runs.
9-0. He
Yeah.
went 9-0 in the UFC to start. The knockout over Werdum all the way to the first title defense for Frank Mir.
Almost had
Now,
a Brock
since that
Lesnar
point,
win mixed in there, Dan. Almost had a Brock Lesnar win.
almost. Instead, he beat up on Shane Carwin. But since that point, 6-6 with 5 knockout losses. And it's pretty damn clear he ain't the same guy anymore. And obviously, his tools are still the same tools he's always had. You know, his boxing for MMA, you know, starts off with that jab to the body. Obviously, the overhand right that won him the title against Cain Velasquez, the beautiful uppercut he knocked out Werdum with. He's been adding calf kicks to his game as well. But that's about the extent of it. I mean, he's not going to shoot for takedowns. He hasn't shot for a takedown since 2014. I mean, basically, it's knockout or bust. And it's the same story with Jairzinho Rosenstruik as well. However, I would say that Jairzinho Rosenstruik, despite coming off a devastating knockout loss to Ngannou, who, I mean, let's face it, he touches anyone on the chin, and they're going to be sent to another universe. So besides that, I feel like Jairzinho's been pretty durable, and I feel like he's still on the come up. You know, he still has those aspirations to be a top 5 guy, to be a future world champion. Whereas JDS, let's be honest, he's strictly fighting for the money, because you put him in one bad spot, you hit him with one big shot, he's going to cover up and go home. And I mean, like, it's no shame in losing to a guy like Ngannou, but like, when you lose to Curtis Blades the way you did, now let's, before anyone's like, oh, Curtis Blades is a top 3 guy, hear me out. Curtis Blades ground and pound finish him, or did Curtis Blades finish him standing? Curtis Blades finished him standing. Let's take it a step further. How many other people has Curtis Blades finished standing? 0. So the fact that a guy who is not known for his knockout power standing is going out there and standing TKOing a guy like JDS, and let's be honest, he didn't even drop. He got hit with one big shot, covered up, let the ref come in. I don't think he's got the same heart he used to have. I don't think he wants it like he used to. And honestly, quite frankly, I don't give a shit how nice his abs look. I don't give a shit about his cool mustache. I think that he's going to get knocked out in the first round. So I'm going Jairzinho Rosenstruik to knock out the former champion, Junior Cigano dos Santos, and get back on track here in the heavyweight featured bout.
You know what? That wouldn't surprise me, which that's why I didn't sound too confident in my JDS pick. However, just to counter that and explain why I scared myself as well into a JDS pick was because there was a really durable guy I was high on, and who knows, maybe he had Flintstone vitamins himself too. Oh, actually, the test shows that he had throughout his parts of his career. And I'm not dissing Ben Rothwell. I like Ben Rothwell, but you remember that it was in Zagreb, Croatia, and Ben Rothwell was on that run. You know, he made me some nice money by knocking out Overeem. Even in Mitrione, I think I got him at slight dog odds, which was kind of crazy. You look in retrospect, right? And I remember feeling, not uber confident because it was a heavyweight fight, Dan, but pretty confident. All the wars kind of got into JDS. I was kind of thinking that, and JDS shows up and looks like the JDS of old. But again, and folks, I'm not, read what you will, but I'm just gonna go ahead and use the word we've been using because I guess we're adults who joke like kids at the same time. But yeah, he may have had some Flintstone vitamins there, Dan, and we've had sketchy performances both skill wise and eye test wise since JDS. So it's hard to be confident even if you are picking him like me in the spot. But however, perhaps it's because I've been scared off from these intangibles before. And the sample size, albeit getting stronger, still not strong enough. I guess I'll default with the veteran here. Although it is strange, man. I feel like I'm Dan. For you know me, a lot of our audience does. They know I love myself some pressure fighters, man. Guys to win late. Guys with grappling edges, etc., etc. And I feel like I'm picking all the outside fighters for this fight here. Perhaps there's more to come, but yeah, I don't like my pick, but that's my pick.
It's fine. I mean, I think the fans like it when we disagree. And also, just to bring up your point, because I was actually thinking Rothwell was going to win that fight too. However, that was nearly half a decade ago. And since that point, JDS has been knocked out 3 times. Also, let's take it a step further. What's Jairzinho's striking style? It's a very counter-based style. We know that JDS likes to come out with here with these calf kicks too, sometimes when the hands aren't working. And one thing I really like about Jairzinho is his kick returns. Like you kick him, immediately a kick's coming right back at you. But then on the feet, where JDS kind of swings wild, I feel like Jairzinho is kind of tight with his boxing, which is going to be able to counter a guy like JDS. And then the last step, the heart, I feel like you hit JDS with one big shot, either he's knocked out or he's, checking out. Whereas Jairzinho, you have to knock him out because that Overeem fight is all the proof I need that this guy's got serious heart because he took a whooping, came back, and you cannot count him out till the final second of a 5-round fight. That's when he got the knockout. So deep waters, I got Jairzinho. Power and durability, I got Jairzinho.
Last point here, just because you reminded me of it, it's worth at least touching on before we move on. Is that is the Ngannou? We both agree that he's got life-changing power, but that was kind of another thing that kind of worried me here too. Was again JDS, despite he's definitely got the miles, he's definitely on the way out. He's in the winter of his career. I'm not arguing any of that, but I always argue that the time off, like even though I picked against Stipe for the rematch, I wrote in that breakdown the time off is going to favor Stipe much better. And it did. And because what was the talk and the speculation, rounding it back to a Francis Ngannou knockout, was that even 5 months wasn't enough time. Or and I don't know about you, Dan, but I'm more along the lines of the common 6 months as far as life-changing KOs. I like to see at least that 6-month mark, much less from the motherfucker of motherfuckers, pardon my French, for our audience here in Francis Ngannou. And it has been 3 months. And he's making that return. I guess that's got to be the one flag. But other than that, I have no issue with Rosenstruik being favored to win.
Yeah, obviously, you got to question his confidence, his chin, all that stuff. It's just that luckily he's fighting another guy that's been coming off 2 knockout losses, who we know his chin and his confidence is diminished too. So that's where I do lean with Rosenstruik. But I mean, they're heavyweights. JDS, one of the greatest knockout artists in the history of the sport. He can knock him out too. But I'm going Rosenstruik. Let's see what happens.
All this talk about knockouts and opposite sides. Here's what's going to happen, folks. They're both going to be so scared, and they're both going to be leaning on the counter. We're getting Lewis Ngannou too, baby. We're getting a staring contest that ends in a draw. You heard it here first.
Oh, could you imagine? Now, Dan Tom, in the bantamweight division, we got a showdown between Merab Dvalishvili and John Dodson.
This is a perfect gatekeeper match. And like Brunson, you've got another athletic southpaw who can wrestle, who can deliver hard shots. But to your point, I agree, Dan. This is a kind of a true outcome fight where it's either Dodson early and via knockout. Yes, Dodson has 2 subs, but they're both the same guy. So unless your name is Zach White, you're not getting submitted by John Dodson. And those were like over a decade ago too, mind you. But so it pretty much is KO or bust. Although I could also see, bitch, tipping my hand here, Dan. Again, I don't know what's wrong with me. I love Merab. I'm usually a guy who picks and looks to fade Dodson, especially because he gets frustrated. And now you're going to put him in a small cage against a wrestler who frustrates guys inherently with his style. You think I'd be all over Merab in this spot again? Dan Tom, the pressure fighter over the low output counter fighter. Dan Tom's going to take the pressure wrestler. Again, Dan, I don't know what's wrong with me, dude. I'm siding again with the lower output, or maybe not even with the output, but the outside striker in the small cage, which is totally unlike me. But essentially, when I went back to look at it, I still believe it's a true outcome fight. That if it goes to decision, it's pretty much going to be Merab, even with judges. Like I could actually even see a best case scenario for Dodson, where he edges 2 rounds out of the 3 for damage, completely gasses in the 3rd, and you have everybody arguing over 2 things, whether it was 10-8 because he got, takedowns the whole time but didn't do any damage, because even if you're a Merab supporter, that is a problem of his, and we'll touch on that in a second. And again, Dodson usually will start to lose pace somewhere toward the end of the 2nd or beginning of the 3rd. Nathaniel Wood despite his best efforts, didn't exactly bring the pace others have. He didn't bring the pace Merab's going to bring. So there was still that opening, that last little opening in the third round. And sure enough, Dodson catches him right. So not exactly analogous, but you should at least give Dodson credit that his power does carry late. However, Dan, in this fight, unless he gets that knockout by about midway through the second round, he's either going to have to deal with a classic Dodson controversial decision to whether it's controversial or not. Dodson's going to be pissed off. He's going to get hit in the balls like 3 times, right? And not get a point for it, even though he gets hit in the balls every dang time. Like it's going to be
not a Dodson fight unless he gets hit in the balls.
Absolutely, it's going to be a classic hit in the balls and frustrated at the decision. Like I could totally see that, and that's why I don't have a problem with Merab being favored. But when I looked at it closer, and it really illuminated it, and Gustavo Lopez is better than a lot of people realize. He's a guy that I've seen and got to roll with in the gym. But you kind of see it in a lot of his fights where he almost wrestles himself into a hole. Now, thankfully, he's not like Tim Elliott and he gasses himself out and finds his way into submissions. Merab, even though he does take pockets of time to recover people, he is not as nonstop as one would believe. That being said, if it's a fight to the death with no round time limit, yeah, dude, I'm taking Merab like every time. He'll take his time to recover, but he's always going to come back. He's always going to fight hard for your money, so to speak. But when I looked at it, Dan, and I'm going to bounce it to you here. As aggressive and a honey badger as he is and he deserves to be, how many fighters do you know, Dan, who will consistently, whether they're winning the fight, losing the fight, winning the round, losing the round, getting the takedown, even hurting their opponent, will stop, separate on their own accord, and literally back themselves up all the way to the end of the cage? Because Merab Dvalishvili does it in literally almost all his fights. More importantly, he does it most consistently in his recent fights. And that's a big fucking problem because you're giving Dodson, pardon my French, but you're giving Dodson time to reset, recalculate, and pull off some veteran upset stuff that Dodson looks pretty motivated to do. You look at the fight even with Peter Yan, who it's more impressive looking what Peter Yan did, and Dodson was able to drop him. And of course, it was ultimately what we're talking about here and hinting at. Its pace is going to be Dodson's enemy, and it was in the Yan fight, but Dodson was like, forget his crazy hairstyle. Like he actually had a belly in that fight, which was uncharacteristic. And you look at the fight in Nathaniel Wood, he's much more in shape. You look at his social media coming into this fight, much more in shape, working with wrestlers, even brought in Renzo Gracie, black belt, and judo national champions, which, by the way, Merab is a judo guy, folks. That's part of the reason why his newaza, his ground control, he's still learning from Sarah and Aljo, because in judo, it's real quick attacks, and you're getting points for takedowns over and over again. That's why, as impressive as it is, many like myself will still kind of criticize the potential holes to that style. So I'm being long-winded here, Dan. Take the steering wheel from me, but am I crazy for picking Dodson here?
I mean, it's a guy that's got wins over TJ Dillashaw, Pedro Munoz, Nathaniel Wood. So, I mean, his resume speaks for itself. He's been at the top of the division for a long time. I understand. And also, looking at the line movement, follow us at line_movement. Go to linemovement.com. Comment below. 60-cent drop. Okay, minus 180 to minus 240 for Merab Dvalishvili. So a lot of actions coming in. But Dan, now I got to tell you why I'm taking Merab Dvalishvili here. Because look, you're right about everything you said. I mean, Dodson, he's got the incredible speed. He's got some veteran crafty stuff. I mean, he can stuff takedowns. His grappling ain't bad either. And honestly, I think he's going to stuff the first takedown. I think he's going to stuff the second takedown. I think he's going to stuff the third takedown. I just don't think he's going to stuff the fourth, fifth, and sixth takedown. And I do agree with you. I mean, it's not even a matter of agreeing. It's facts what you're saying, that he lets his opponent back up. Now, let's just examine that exact thing we're talking about here. He takes them down. He lets them back up. 100% factual. There's no bullshit with what you said whatsoever. But let's talk about the psychology of the fighter. If Chris Weidman takes you down and you get back up, all of a sudden it's, you know what I mean? He's huffing and puffing, discouraged, like, fuck, why couldn't I hold him down? Merab's the kind of guy that will take you down and then purposely let you back up just so he can take you down again. This is a guy that wants to set takedown records. You remember his interview after the Gustavo Lopez fight, and they're like, hey, Merab, you beat your takedown record by 1 takedown, and he goes crazy. He's like, yes, like that. Like this is the kind of shit he lives for. He wants to go out there, pick you up and slam you, demoralize you, humiliate you, embarrass you, and most importantly, gas you out. Because one thing about Dodson, yes, he's a very fast guy, but he doesn't fight at a fast pace. There's got to be a, you got to distinguish between the two things. Yes, he is very fast when he blitzes, but from bell to bell, he does not fight at a fast, hard pace. He really doesn't. He likes to take breaks in fights, and when it's time to blitz, he blitzes. The thing is, Merab's going to be making him work from the second the bell rings. Now, if Dodson can go out there, clip him with a shot that ends the fight, hey, congrats, John Dodson. That's another knockout on your resume. It's just, yeah, I think you'll land some shots, but to land the fight-ending blow on a guy with the conditioning of Merab, it's just hard for me to see because, as you know, it's not as simple as your chin. It's also a lot of things that have to do with recovering from knockdowns is your cardio. And one thing going into that Nathaniel Wood fight, I took Nathaniel Wood, but I knew going into it, like, hey, Nathaniel Wood's kind of chinny. He's been knocked out before. He's been dropped in other fights. Like, that was a risk I knew I was taking. I was like, hey, Daniel's better everywhere, but he's chinny. Hopefully he doesn't get knocked out. He'll go out there and win this fight. Did get knocked out. But here with Merab, I don't think he's chinny at all. I think he's got elite conditioning. I think he's got the best cardio in the entire weight class. I think he pushes a pace like no other. I think he breaks takedown records. And again, while they're fresh, or while Dodson's fresh, because Merab's fresh all 15 minutes, while Dodson's fresh, yeah, I think you'll stuff the first few. But when it comes time to that 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th takedown, I don't think he's going to be stuffing them anymore. And yeah, he might get back up from the first few, but once he starts getting up from that 3rd and 4th, that's when you're going to start to see his cardio start to diminish a little bit. That's when you're going to start to see him breathe a little harder. That's when the takedowns are going to get a little easier. And towards the 2nd and 3rd round, I expect him to be held down because you can look at the stats and it says that he's got 80% takedown defense. And hey, that's an amazing stat. And I wouldn't be surprised if he actually kept that number in this fight too, because it's like, I think he's going to stuff the first few takedowns. It's just when he doesn't stuff them, as they start to pile on, that's when I think he starts to gas out a little bit. That's when I think he starts to break a little bit. That's when I think he's not willing to push the same pace a guy like Merab is. And that's when I think it's going to get harder to get back up. So I'm going with Merab Dvalishvili via unanimous decision here.
It's weird. Dodson's kind of right at that end as far as primes go. He's 35 now. Once you get to 36, that's danger zone at bantamweight. Even though he is an athletic outlier, he is a smaller guy, not cutting as much weight. He does have those things going for him. But you look at it, this is like kind of a test for both guys in that sense, right? To see how much, maybe Dodson's kind of fallen off. Now, it's interesting for me, Dan, because when I get high on these guys like Merab, I almost got to, kind of counter the steering wheel. And I don't want to do it too hard. But you get excited about these guys, and especially we do it, look at Chimaev, right? We've talked about that on this show, especially these wrestling guys that are from, Eastern Europe or Russia or any of those neighboring Caucasus, right? Everybody likes to get really, really excited. And part of me is like, when you see those guys, I don't know about you, Dan, I like to go, okay, even if they're not ready for the top of the division, from a stylistic perspective, who are these guys' worst matchups? And feel free to chime in on who you think Merab's worst matchups are. But my theory, outside of obviously Aljo, which puts an interesting dynamic if he wins this fight, right? Outside of that, behind doors closed business aside, I feel like it's either going to be a counter fighter like John Dodson, who has knockout power, counter wrestling, can scramble, southpaw stance, southpaw counter fighter, something that we have not seen, orthodox or southpaw counter fighter. We have not seen Merab face, which is part of the reason why I'm taking him here. One of those things that I don't disagree with Merab being favored. Just show me. But if he does show me, Dan, I think that the other potential worst matchup in the division is going to be like a guy like a Pedro Munoz, who has the guillotine and the grappling chops, right? So am I crazy for either of those two names? And who do you think is the worst matchup for Merab off the top of your head?
Great question. Honestly, and this might actually be a surprise to you, I think Cody Garbrandt's a tough fight for Merab because you don't have to worry about Merab's knockout power, which we know that, Cody doesn't have the best durability in the world. And Cody's so damn fast with his hands. We know he's got a huge edge there. Plus, is he former D1? I know he's got a serious wrestling background. So I think
Ohio's a serious wrestling state, so yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
so. I feel like he might actually have the wrestling to keep it standing, light him up. So I think Garbrandt's a tough matchup for him. Yeah, Munoz, because Munoz can push a pace, he can knock guys out. The guillotine is world class. So yeah, but the thing is, Dan Tom, it's number 3 and number 5 in the world we're talking about. Dodson's number 12.
Yeah.
Not that number 12 can't win fights. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying when you ask me the question of who do I think are the tough matchups for him, I guess it's kind of interesting that I went ahead and named the number 3 and number 5 guy on planet Earth, because I'm not naming number 7 Jimmy Rivera. I'm not naming number 8 Rafael Assunção. I'm going all the way to the deep end of the division to find guys to beat him. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens Saturday night. I'm very interested.
Me too, man. I'm not saying this is a dog that I'm super confident in, although I'm sticking to my Dodson pick. It just ultimately, even against guys who weren't counter fighters, like I was able to see them hit shifting left hands, or when he did face the southpaw, though Casey Kenny will switch stances, like he hit the same left hand that Dodson loves to hit, or orthodox fighters when they came forward and shifted to southpaw, like his last opponent did, was able to hit him clean, wasn't able to rock him because, again, you mentioned Merab's durability. I think that's something good going for him, because I think that Dodson or anybody, I think that he's durable, and that doesn't mean that Merab can't be knocked out, Dan. I just have a feeling that Merab's going to be one of those guys you have to knock out like 3 times, because you're going to have to knock him out twice just to get him wobbly, because he's a guy you'll knock out. He's going to fight autopilot. He's just going to keep going. I think, Dodson may have to like really have a perfect shot and follow up on it on top of it if he's going to have a chance of getting him out. But I'm either picking Dodson to win or edge out 2 rounds and lose a semi-controversial decision.
Dan Tom, last but not least, in the featherweight division, for a guy like Daniel Pineda to test positive in that league, be the only one, like, dude, he must have been like, whatever shit he was taking. I'm very curious, because now you're coming into the UFC with the USADA testing pool. Pobrecito, as we like to say, you know what I mean? So I think it's a situation where I need to see what he looks like off the juice, because you're against Herbert Burns. You make one mistake on the mat against a guy like Herbert Burns, and the fight will be over shortly after, Dan Tom. And you go back to Daniel Pineda's last fight against Jeremy Kennedy, where it's a no contest. So, I know they say assumptions make an ass out of you and me, but I'm going to assume he was on the juice since it's a no contest. It got overturned. He got his back taken by Jeremy Kennedy in that fight. Now, granted, beautiful guillotine choke to finish. You got your back taken by Jeremy Kennedy. What's going to happen off the juice when Herbert Burns takes your back? I know people are trying to say this is a dog or pass situation. Look, I love Daniel Pineda. I remember Daniel Pineda's first run in the UFC. I was actually one of the people that was bummed he got cut. I was like, man, this is an exciting brawler, win, lose, or draw. He goes out there and it's going to be a finished win or lose, guaranteed. So I like Pineda. But stylistically speaking, what does Pineda like to do? He likes to scramble every single fight. He relies on his scrambling ability. And that's great. I love it. It's entertaining. But relying on your scrambling ability against one of the Burns brothers sounds like a recipe for disaster as far as I'm concerned, Dan Tom.
Yeah, man. And again, no disrespect to Pineda. He's also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Let's not forget that. But Dan, like, all those black belts aren't created equal, man. And even though, the Burns brothers have, black belts and the pictures of them in the gi, and they've got the IBJJF creds, they're also very versed in competing in no gi and obviously MMA, which is why we're talking about them. So in other words, they're not the type of jiu-jitsu guys who ignore the leg locks and put their nose up in the air. And then, they get tapped, like Pineda got tapped twice by knee bar by Chaz Skelly. Shout outs to Chaz Skelly. I know he's he's one of our favorites here.
Guy.
Huh? Yeah.
Guy Chaz Skelly. Shout out.
He's been on your show, Half the Battle. Shout out to your show before. Love when Chaz makes an appearance on there. But yeah, he got the knee bar twice on Daniel Pineda. So again, no disrespect to Pineda's black belt, but they're not all created equal. And despite having the veteran edge, which is another edge you're going to look at on Pineda's side, he's got the UFC experience. He's got, he's traveled around camps and fighting environments, etc. However, Go look at how many decision wins the veteran has for when things go long. How many decision wins are there, Dan?
I'm really glad you brought this up because everyone's saying all you got to do is weather this early storm of Herbert Burns, go out there, win the decision. Well, guess what, guys? He's 0-5 when fights go to decision. He's been submitted 6 times on the mat. So as far as I'm concerned, his only path to victory is a knockout here. And he does have 8 or 9 if you include, the one that got overturned. He's got 9 knockouts on his record. So if he can overcome this early jiu-jitsu storm, take it to deep waters, maybe knock him out, I can see it. It's just relying on a guy who's 0-5 in decisions to go to decision, relying on a guy who's been submitted 6 times to survive the elite back take of Herbert Burns. And real quick, so I know I cut you off, but real quick, I feel like people have been discrediting Herbert Burns. I feel like people aren't paying attention to his improvement, his evolution. Like, this guy is serious. When you compare Herbert Burns 3 years ago to the guy we see today, I mean, it's night and day difference. And also, the regionals, he beat that guy Timofey, who knocked out Eddie Alvarez. He obviously finished the former M1 champion Nate Landwehr, finished UFC vet Evan Dunham. Like, Herbert Burns is the real deal. His fight on the Contender Series against Derek Minner finished him in the first round. This is elite level jiu-jitsu. And what's interesting, to take it a step further, to compare him to his brother, because oftentimes when you see brother tandems, there's the talented brother, there's the shitty brother. But in this case, both brothers are super talented. And it's like when you saw Gilbert Durinho first come into the UFC, we always knew his jiu-jitsu black belt is amazing. He's got this power, but there were little things in the in-between that needed to be tweaked. The striking defense, the pacing, things among those lines. And you could say the same thing about Herbert Burns, but now look at the finished product for Gilbert Durinho, about to fight for a UFC title. So all I'm saying is, do not count out the potential progression that Herbert Burns is about to make, because what he's already done is astronomical improvement. Just wait till he gets more experience.
Speaking of brother hypotheticals, I know what you mean. I would say and take in literal sense that Patricky would win if he were to face Pineda as far as brother tandems go. I would not take, though, Dan Lozon to beat, if we're thinking about 155 brothers, too. I would take Jim Miller. I would take Jim Miller because he's the 155er, I guess, obviously. But yeah, if you comport Dan Miller down to 155, we're going in crazy directions here. The point is, it's a great point. The point is, Pineda, it's not hard to tell, folks. If you look at this guy's record, he's a do or die fighter. And Dan, what were we just talking about, speaking of matchups or bad matchups on paper? What is the worst type of matchup for a do or die fighter? I would argue it is a specialist, right? If you're a do or die fighter, you do not want a specialist, a guy who knows how to put you away as soon as you fall into that zone. Because if you're a do or die fighter, you're probably going to be aggressive. You're probably not going to be a great tightrope walker. You're probably not going to be good at staying in the zones you're supposed to stay into in a fight. And again, he should be. He's got the veteran experience, but not enough for me to trust it. So I actually officially went with Burns in this spot as well.
Dan, Tom, I think it's about time to wrap this show up. We truly want to thank all our listeners, our fans, our supporters. Thank you guys so much. Make sure y'all go blitzbet.eu, our Canadian listeners, everybody else, stay tuned. And also, just want to say shout out to our producer, Jordan. Thank you so much for everything you do. To our editors, our graphics guy, James, Dan, Joe, thank you all. You guys are the real MVPs and the reason we are here right now. So thank you guys so much. Again, special shout out to all our supporters and listeners. We cannot thank you enough. Tell a friend. Let them know about us. Share this video. Give us a like, a subscribe, whatever the case may be. Go to line_movement on Twitter. Go to linemovement.com. We truly appreciate it. Everybody stay safe and enjoy the fights, and we will speak soon.